Life story of Harriett Louisa Brewer Russell. Harriett Louisa Brewer Russell was born in Big Cottonwood, now known as Holiday, Salt Lake County, Utah, on March 13, 1872. She was a lovely baby with blue eyes and fair complexion with lots of light hair. Jacob and Anne were proud of this little daughter. Their three oldest children were boys. Harriet's first recollection was of finding a big, ugly toad in the garden and throwing stones, peaches, or anything else could find at it to kill it. Her father came along and scolded her severely as he said toads keep the bugs and flies out of the garden. Harriet was good-natured and full of the joy of living. She was 9 years old when the family came to Arizona and was thrilled with the prospects of this new adventure. It was a cold morning in November when they started on their journey. The children snuggled down in the covered wagon to keep warm and dream of this wonderful country, where it was summer all winter and orange and flowers at Christmas time. When they reached the Colorado River, it looked so scary Harriet crawled into the wagon and covered her head as they drove the oxen and wagons onto the boat which took them across the river. When they brought the cows across, one of them got frightened and jumped into the water and swam across. The children had fun gathering pretty rocks as they walked along with the slow-moving oxen train, playing and kinds of games and tricks on one another. By Christmas, they reached the little Colorado River. High on the smooth rock bank of the river, they found the names of their neighbors and friends that had come a short time before them. Harriet was happy to find her best girlfriend's name among them and wondered if Santa Claus would find them so far away. They built a big fire and sat around telling stories. To Harriet's great joy, Santa found them okay and left her a lovely doll. Eventually, they reached Holbrook and their friends. Soon they moved to the timber country, later known as Pinedale, where Harriet grew to young womanhood. She loved the beautiful country, the colorful Indians who came into Pinedale to trade. Their store became quite an Indian trading post. They came by caravans from the south slope of the mountains where they lived and grew Indian corn with different shades of purple, blue, and speckled kernels, which they carried in large bean sacks on ponies. From these the women made their peaky bread, an Indian corn bread, which keeps for weeks and is delicious to eat. The women had long, black, straight hair hanging in braids and wore bright-colored calico dresses. They wore lots of bead necklaces and bracelets and heavy silver concho belts. The men wore buckskin shirts and leggings and were dressed in bright-colored calico shirts for the women and had long hair braided. They seemed to enjoy their visits to the settlement. Often they remained several days, camping on the outskirts of the settlement and doing a brisk trade. They brought their food supplies and colored calico and trinkets. They wore their hair long with colored headbands around their head. Harriet also befriended some of the Indians and visited them in their camps. Harriet, early in life, came to an unusual understanding and appreciation of her beautiful surroundings. The big pine trees were her playmates. She loved the open spaces, the birds and flowers. There was little opportunity for education and cultural development. Her mother was a great influence in her life because of her desire for knowledge and good books. She inspired her children to desire those things. The rugged wilderness which existed in their community, mostly herders for the large cattle and sheep ranches, left little time for church and social activities. Even so, they loved and respected her father and were influenced greatly by his uprightness and good example. As was the custom in most of the rural pioneer communities, the young people of Pinedale made their own recreation, which consisted largely of house parties and weekend public dancing. In those days, Latter-day Saints were counseled not to attend dances given by those of other faiths. Consequently, they had many parties and dances in their homes. There were no musical instruments except the violin, guitar, and sometimes an organ. The music was furnished by the young people, and they danced the square dances and schottisches. They also played games and enjoyed visiting and getting acquainted. St. Church standards did not permit round dancing. The young people of Pinedale was largely submissive to the wishes of their elders and contented themselves with square dancing. Harriet loved to dance. She was light on her feet and could dance beautifully. She secretly boasted that none of the young men of her crowd could swing her off her feet. She loved the beauties of life, culture, refinement, pretty clothing, and all that such things could mean in a young person's life. In order to assist in securing some of these finer things, she did housework for the neighbors. She especially enjoyed working for Letty Bryson, a young mother of the community who had attained the distinction of being a schoolteacher. Letty could not only teach school, but in addition to her scholastic abilities, she was a lady of considerable charm and refinement, besides being the wife of the postmaster and storekeeper. It was while working under these favorable circumstances that Harriet met the young man who later became her husband, Henry Russell. Henry was Letty's brother from Alpine. He had been working for Flake in the timber with Harriet's brother Joseph when they were snowed in and had to return to Alpine over the older girls, who also thought Henry a pretty likely prospect. Thus it was Harriet with her two girlfriends met a man most of the other girls soon brought the young man around to the point of asking her to marry him. Although only 15, she eagerly ran to the first presidency. The answer couldn't have been other than yes, but with a hint to use scripture. Couldn't be nice if the young man would take her to the temple? Harriet always admired that first sight she fell in love with the Russell name, but the older girls, being more objective, seemed to take greater interest in the bearded Henry. Their first home was on the Russell Ditch in Homestead Flat, Alpine, Arizona. A young people group increased their faith and testimony of the divinity of the gospel of Jesus Christ through their willingness to serve in the Alpine Ward, which was under the leadership of Bishop Edward Noble. On Franklin Avenue, although the country was beautiful and they had a good ranch, because of the ravages of grasshoppers on their crops, they became discouraged and first thought they would move to Colorado after disposing of their home. But on their arrival at Springerville, where Henry's father's family was living, the young couple decided to purchase a small 10-acre tract of land in a room where they built a small 2-room log cabin, which was the home for the next 10 years. In this home were born Ernest Edward, Edna Ann, Grover Welford, and Utilis Leroy. Their first great sorrow came with the death of Grover, who at the age of approximately a year died from what is now believed to have been typhoid fever. In the fall of 1898, Henry was called to fill a mission for his church and to labor in Kansas, which was in the Central States Mission. Through this call came the fulfillment of the promised temple marriage. The nearest temple was at St. George, Utah, requiring several weeks to complete the return trip, which was made with teams and covered wagons by way of Lee's Ferry. For the trip, a company was organized. Those in the company included Harriet and Henry, and their family were Adam Brewer, who went to assist Harriet and family on their return journey, Leroy and Elizabeth Russell and family, Jim and Phoebe Peterson, Rhino and Kate Brewer, Sarah and Sidney Webb and Annie Allred, Pollard, the accomplished ox team driver, and the Toms family. Henry proceeded to Salt Lake City, thence to his field of labor in Kansas. The company returned to Arizona, arriving in Pinedale just before Christmas, where Harriet and the children resided for the winter with her parents. During the following spring, Hattie, Harriet's brother, took her and family home to Eager and assisted in planting a crop of grain on the 10 acres and potatoes at Benton Creek. On July 24, 1899, while Henry was on his mission, Utilis Leroy was born at Eager. During Henry's absence, Harriet showed considerable resourcefulness in her efforts to assist in keeping Henry in the mission field and in caring for her children. She obtained the agency for a system of dress patterns, including communities. She obtained a knitting machine which turned out a beautiful women's and children's stockings and men's socks which were sold. Although times were hard, yet with the goodness of Hattie's father's family, neither she or her children suffered for any of the necessities of life. It always seemed there was not a very crowded atmosphere of life, but also a home enriched with the larger view. She always had the beautiful tradition for which we, Hattie's children, should be eternally grateful. It was characteristic of the Brewster family to love and appreciate their inherited characteristics and their ingenuity and energy. It was characteristic of Hattie's children to cooperate with and in harmony with the large Brewster clan. Another characteristic of Hattie's family was that they thought a family, in order to be properly fed, needed milk. As a wedding present, they presented Hattie with a beautiful red heifer calf, which she named Dolly. Although Dolly died comparatively young, she left a daughter which was named Pet. In the Russell family, Old Pet was just about the most important cow in the herd. They couldn't leave home without Pet trailing behind the wagon, nearly always carrying a rich supply of dairy products. Alphalea and irrigating at Eager made a wonderful feed, but also was a source of great worry because cattle frequently bloated and died. Pet had a habit of eating too fast and too much, resulting in gas pains. It was always Pet last to drive in the Russell household to go to the corral to see if Pet was alive or just in trouble with the bellyache. Again, at the crack of dawn, the first chore was to see if Pet were still living. When the family moved to the Gila Valley in 1907, Old Pet soon followed and lived for many years to mother a large and profitable posterity. After Henry returned from his mission, while living in the Gila Valley near Safford, several attempts were made to establish a satisfactory family home, but for various reasons none proved entirely satisfactory. Soon following their arrival in the Gila Valley, the family moved to Duncan, where they rented a tract of land from Kef Packer. And with Albert, Hattie's brother, who furnished the team, a crop of small grain and a large garden was planted, but because of drought, the harvest was very light. The family next moved to Layton, where Hattie's children first had the opportunity of growing all the fruit they wanted. Here they canned fruit for the winter, then moved to a rented tract of land near Lebanon, where they spent the winter. The next year, with the small residue from the sale of the home in Eager, an artesian well was drilled on a small homestead near the town of St. John's, near Concho Flats, which was later named Lebanon. This well was unsuccessful because of the sand which filled the well, and the homestead was abandoned. The family next moved to the Cyrus Robinson Ranch, where they planted a crop of sweet potatoes. While living at this place, about 3 miles east of Lebanon, Frank was sent up to the homestead to see if things were in order. While on this way, he picked up a friend, McKean Sanhino. On arriving at the old house, about 3 miles west of Lebanon, the boys arrived at the old house, about 3 miles west of Lebanon, and found the door swinging to and fro. They found the place deserted and the grass growing up around the house and fence. They did not linger long, but hastened home. Frank, age 14, began work in 1911 on the canal and later at the copper mines. His father and mother returned to the Cyrus Robinson Ranch and in 1912 moved to Layton, where the boys attended school. They remained in Layton until 1915 when they moved to Safford, where they purchased a home and where Hattie still resides. While in Clifton, Frank took typhoid fever and was sick for several months, probably never did fully recover from this illness. During August 1902, Hattie's family returned to a new location on a wash about 5 miles east of Lebanon. Land was cleared, an artesian well drilled, and a crop planted. This ranch was the family home for the next 12 years, except for a short period between 1903 and 1905, when the family lived in Pima, where the children enjoyed the best opportunity of their lives for schooling and church activities. Ina was born in Pima April 4, 1904. While helping Adam and Rhino Brewer during haying season at their Black Rock Ranch, Frank also contracted typhoid fever, as did Hiram. One of Hiram's children also contracted, Ann Brewer and the brother Joseph Follett. The latter two died of its effects. And although the others recovered, they suffered the effects of this dreadful disease throughout the remainder of their lives. A fairly comfortable house was constructed on the ranch, which served as the family home. This building was never completed. However, even so, it was the best home the family had known up to that time. A schoolhouse was built, and the school went to Russell District. Carl Rex was born at the ranch June 10, 1906, and died in July 1909. This was a great sorrow to Hattie, but her sorrow was deepened by the death of her lovely 5-year-old daughter Ina, who died March 10, 1910, of a malady which resulted from fright. Ina, although not old enough to attend school, went to a school party which was arranged by Sister McAllister, the teacher. Having been assigned some small parts on the program, Ina was so very happy, but on return from the party, some boys thoughtlessly teased her about her small size, and she frightened her to the extent that she soon passed away. Eva was born on the ranch April 13th, 1911, and Luella was born in Thatcher November 5th, 1913. Through all these trials and hardships, Hattie was courageous and brave, ever looking and praying for the finer and better things for the benefit of her children. There were no easy spots in that part of pioneering. Her equine was one of faith, hope, courage, and prayer that the family could muster to survive. All this time, Hattie worked in organizations of the church, a teacher in Sunday school in Pinedale, and president of the primary in Eager, and president of the Relief Society at Lebanon. She got a system of dress patterns making by which she could make patterns for anything she wanted to sew: coats, men's suits, dresses, etc. Besides all her own family, she sewed for others. During clothes for both men and women were jobs. She did washing and ironings for women and men alike, and so much sickness they had many obligations. Harriet was anxious that her family get an education. When Ernest said he was going to give up trying to go to school because he was needed to help the family, his mother told him to pack his clothes and she would write to Temple to see if he could enroll. So in 1911 he came to Temple to go to school. Harriet had made him a bunch of new shirts, and she was as proud as she could be that Ernest was going to school. He first went to Temple and told Dr. Matthews he wanted to go to school. Then he got a job in Chandler putting up hay. When school began, he was making so much he didn't want to quit, but Dr. Matthews, president of the college, looked him up and got him into school. He went there for 3 years. In the meantime, the family moved down to the valley in 1914 and settled in a little home in Chandler. Then they moved to Glendale, where Frank, Tillis, and Fred worked at dairying. When the First World War came along, Ernest had gone on to the university of his first year's training school in San Francisco. Frank was drafted into the service, and the Tillis. Again, Harriet was thrown on her resources to see her sold. They moved to Mesa, where her brother, Adam, was living, and brought a little home north of Mesa, in North Evergreen, where she lived for 19 years, until the time when her husband, and in coming to take care of her family, and Alice, who had lived with her since her mother's death. She got work at the hospital and moved into town. They lived at the Temple Court for a while, then bought the large corner lot where the Chevron oil station stands, north of the Temple, on the highway, and built a house there. Frank, Ernest, Tillis, and Edna were married, and Frank was working on the Temple. His health was not very good, and they lived there for a time. It was while they were there that Luella had typhoid fever and was so terribly sick. Harriet said she knew she was going to get well, but one day she had a fever of 106, and it looked like she was going to die. They called all the family together, and as we want in Dr. Morris, I have done all I can for her, and now it is up to you and your God. Bishop Isaac Dana and Gove Phelps came, and we had a prayer for her, and while the bishop was still praying, she stopped moaning, and the fever was down to normal. She got perfectly well, and today she has a family of 5 children and has filled a mission to the North Central States Mission before she was married. Frank was never very well after he had typhoid fever, and then he returned from the service. His stomach bothered him a great deal. His children, March 1928, was a sad blow to Hattie. He left 4 wonderful children that have been a great comfort to her. Eva married Ellis Johnson during the war. He died of appendicitis about 4 years after their marriage. She used his life insurance to help go on a mission. With her mother's help, she too filled a mission. Notable mission. After her return, she married and had 2 children. Mother was so happy to have her daughter able to render this service to their church. After Ernest was married, he also filled a mission to Texas-Louisiana Mission, which was a great joy to her. She has lived her property left as a missionary, and for many years. All the family which shows her unselfish love for her children, and the gospel which she dearly loves. Tillis and his wife Cleo are doing work in the temple 3 times each week as ordinance workers, so they too are missionaries. All her life has been devoted to her family and grandchildren. They love her as she, and her sorrows too. She loves them all, and they love her in return. When the family came down to Mesa, Henry went to Miami to work in the mines, to pay debts. Dr. Hills, etc., incurred through the long illness with typhoid in the Gila Valley. The boys were going to help their mother. Henry had not been well for years. Finally, he had to quit work, and it was learned he had cancer of the stomach, from which he died March 22, 1935, in Mesa. He is buried beside Frank in the Mesa Cemetery. All the children live here but Fred and Eva. Fred lives in Safford and Eva in California. Fred's 3 lovely daughters are married and have families. Jeannie expects her first one soon. Edna's children are married. Harriet has lived with Edna since Leslie passed away on July 18, 1950. Ernest's family are all grown and married, but Dan, who returned recently from Korea and is now instructor at Rucker Air Base, Alabama. Tillis's family are all married and have lovely children, so her joy is complete with her children and grandchildren. Her health is pretty good, and she still lives life. There are 32 grandchildren and 49 great-grandchildren to call her blessed. I am sure the Lord has blessed her abundantly. The crowning glory of her life has been her family, and so, because she loved them so, her heart has been turned to her ancestors, and she has gathered the genealogy and history of hundreds of her people. This work has been a great joy in her later life, and it is marvelous what she has accomplished. She has a great pedigree and hundreds of family groups. Harriet says her mother went back to Logan in Idaho after they came to Arizona to take to her relatives on both sides. She has done a wonderful thing to perpetuate their memory. She has also done temple work for them. This has been the work she has loved the most. This is a great sacrifice on the part of her mother, was a great inspiration to us, and her record forms the basis of her genealogical record. As soon as Harriet was able to turn her time to this genealogy work, she set about it with a zeal not equaled by anyone I know, and it is her great desire that she might get her records in good shape, that she might do as we are commanded in the Doctrine and Covenants section. 128-24. Let us therefore, as a church and a people, and as Latter-day Saints, offer unto the Lord an offering in righteousness, and let us present in his holy temple, when it is finished, a book containing the records of our dead, which shall be worthy of all acceptation. Taken from scraps for your scrapbook, compiled by Sister Henry J. Payne, taken from a collection of choice thoughts and poems collected by President L. R. Payne. I heard a man in paradise say this to God: "Let's advertise. You've got a proposition here on which to make billion clear. If I could manage things my way, my plan is this. Make earth folks pay for what you give them, right and day. For instance, take the Milky Way. To see that glittering display, I'd charge them 50 cents a night. To purchase tickets, folks would fight. We'll charge for flowers and song of bird. Why give them free? Why, it's absurd. $1 for each sunset view, the same for every sunrise, too. Fall landscapes will be costly sights. We'll prove a sum from mountain heights. Green, waving brooks will come high, and men will pay to hear winds sigh." Then God replied, "When he had done, I charge for all these things, my son, and costly, costly is my fee, a heart of childlike purity." By Clarence E. Flynn. A wonderful thing is friendship, no matter where you go. Feeling you have a loyal friend is a comforting thing to know, making the days seem brighter, making life worthwhile. And our burdens and cares seem lighter far as we trudge each weary mile. For it's great to know there's someone who always has faith in you, with a prayer and a wish for your happiness and an interest in what you do. If you know someone who believes in you, who knows your faults and still intends by you because of the good there is in you, be careful not to lose that person's friendship. With the aid of one such person, you can be strong. With the aid of 2 such people, you can be a genius and rise to heights such as most people never dreamed of attaining. Be severe with yourself, but supremely gentle with others. Be patient with children and merciful to the aged. Remember that the burdens and heartaches of others are sometimes hard to bear. Keep alert and do what you can to lighten the burdens of others. Do good whenever you can. Keep positive thoughts and desires. Be enthusiastic, one who remembers. they spring up. Cultivate enthusiasm because nothing can be accomplished without it. Enthusiasm is the stream that enables us to make the dream and the mean spring of the whole works. When you can't get what you want, it is good philosophy to want what you can get.